Hello, everyone. Welcome to DevOps Summit 2021. Let me first thank the DevOps visionary leadership to have included data storytelling as a part of this summit, giving its due share of importance to the DevOps community. Thank you for the opportunity you gave me to share my knowledge and wisdom on this subject. My name is Vasu. I run a consulting company based out of Dubai, Navo Incorporation, with my offices in Dubai and Bangalore. We run several workshops and on data storytelling, especially talking about this particular subject. Also, we offer it as a services to very large corporates and global players as well. The topic for today and the next 30 minutes is time frame. I will be sharing my experiences on data storytelling, very ideally positioned as the cultural pivot. Pivot meaning it's going to be the center point in the entire development activity in solutioning for the future. And of course, it also has to take the center stage of being a culture, the data culture that we are talking about for a few decades. I want to set the context first for the next 30 minutes time frame. I will also share certain tools in the process of this 30 minutes time, and also end it up with an illustration to drive home what is a true proper data storytelling. Last year, Tableau survey, many of you would have known this, 82% of the data-driven companies reported critical business advantages during the pandemic, as against 39% who were not data-driven. Data storytelling has risen to 9th place among the 37 BI-related topics, another survey done last year. And of course, 63% remember stories, but only 5% can recall a single statistic. Context number one. I'm not going to introduce, but there are three gentlemen of our greats of our times. They don't need any introduction. They are our generation mass transformers. And they did something in 2019, and I will introduce you what they did. Jeff Bezos, that's called the famous Jeff Bezos note, where he said no to bulleted traditional PowerPoint presentations. So he said, if you have a story, come to me, to all his leadership team. Very quickly followed by Sundar Pichai, Google. He also echoed similar, giving importance to a visual storytelling from his audience. And that was again echoed further by Jack Dorsey. Let's see what they actually told. So this is what he said. Narrative structure is more effective than PowerPoint presentations. That was from Jeff Bezos. And Sundar Pichai said, visual storytelling plays an important role in getting the message across. And Google employees are being trained today to present in a bolder, fresher style. All of you have perhaps known about how Google presents their data and information and so on, in order to make it much more visual. Context number 3. Storytelling is all about making facts human. Today, we fall pretty much short of making it human. Appealing to the emotional side of human, right? Specifically to the DevOps community, communication and persuasion is everybody's job. So if you are dealing with the client side, you are communicating and you are persuading the client towards a certain direction. When you are talking to your team, the development team, again, communication and persuasion is extremely important. So it is not to a specific community, it is to everybody. It's everybody's job. And stories are now playing a very central role in agile transformation of software development teams around the world. Why is it so? Because unless otherwise, collectively, if we don't understand and empathize with the problem that the client is posing, at the end of the day, all of us are trying to find solutions to the problems and challenges, right? And how to make it less rigid, more agile. And that is only when the team gets into the problems, team syncs with the problem. And how can we make them sink into the problem? We need to tell stories to them. So these are my 3 key context I wanted to drive home before I start the data storytelling. By the way, why are stories important? First and foremost thing, it boosts your confidence of whosoever is conveying a specific information or sharing information with the team. So it also commands a certain level of attention because it's a story at the end of the day. You don't need to remember when you have conceived it as a story, right? And if you are going to deliver a story, it becomes very effortless. Comprehension becomes effortless, understanding becomes effortless, and it definitely creates a very positive impression. And that is when people can identify themselves with the problem challenge that they have received. Before we get into data stories, I want to share three fundamentals to communication. Why? Because whenever we talk of story, and now we are talking of, it appears to be a complex stuff, data storytelling, but essentially we are communicating. Very important for us to understand. So what are the three fundamentals to communication? Applies to data storytelling also. And three key elements of data storytelling. If we understand this, then it's much easier for us to step into understanding what data storytelling is. Three fundamentals of communication, no matter what, who, when, where, if you are communicating, these three are extremely essential. ANP, audience, message, and purpose, right? We generally, there's a tendency to get on with the communication part, which means we start message first. Many times we ignore the audience, and by far the purpose is not in the radar screen itself. So this is a toolkit, as you see in the right top corner. I always put it as a toolkit because AMP is something that everybody has to understand, and as a three fundamentals of communication. Audience aren't obligated to hang on to any word, but you need to understand who my audience are and what are they, what are the contextual reference to my audience. And that's very important for me to set my language, visual level, the level and depth of the content. Everything depends upon my clear understanding of my audience. And second is the purpose. But before that, if you know your audience, you can empathize with your audience. You can also, it also allows you to think the way your audience does, because you already are syncing yourself with your audience, and also helps you to act in a manner that can impact your audience. So understanding with the clarity, not just understanding your audience or knowing your audience. Knowing is falls short of everything. So it is understanding with clarity about your audience becomes extremely important. The message is determined by your audience, the clarity of your understanding about your audience, as well as the purpose. Because if you remove the purpose, then you may communicate, but it may not achieve the intended action or whatsoever, right? So message will have to be guided by audience and purpose. So in all my exercises, I tell my team, have the clarity about your audience, and then do you know what you want to achieve arising out of the communication that you're about to start. So these three becomes extremely essential components. Third one, as I said, is the purpose, is the very basic of your communication. Because why are we communicating at the end of the day? Why are we creating the reports? Why are we creating dashboards at the end of the day? Because it has to serve a certain purpose. And that purpose is not just conveying a dashboard, conveying graphs and charts and so on. That is when we need to step, the community, the DevOps community, all of us have to step beyond just delivering an information. I will cover that a little more in a while, right? So we'll move on to the next thing of what are the key elements of data storytelling. So remember AMP as the fundamental, it's a bedrock of any communication. The second thing is when it comes to storytelling, we again do one more, probably a mistake, that whenever we create our reporting tools and dashboards and so on, there is a lot of stress and importance given to the visual side. So therefore we talk a lot of visualizing the graphs and adding a lot of visual elements and so on. In our experience and in our practice, visualization does not come first, it comes last. Not that it is the third important, but in a sequence, the initial focus is given to finding the connection between data sets, between even in a story also. In a typical story, let's come to the typical story before we get into the data. In a typical story, the moment there is a lack of connect between a slide and the next slide, if you are presenting, or a previous line and the next line, you get disconnected. That's how human mind is wired. So when you get disconnected, that's because you lack that connect, as you tell in a sequential form and so on. So important thing is for us to look for the connect in a storytelling. Second thing is, if I have to remember and if I have to act, narrative becomes extremely important. So finding the connect, getting the right kind of narrative, and then followed by adding a fantastic, classy visualization. Narrative here becomes the fulcrum to storytelling, because that is the last mile. And then when we see a lot of reports, we will see that if you, for example, here contextually, I can share one example. If you talk about ABC analysis, it's another analysis of several reports that one is exposed to. But the moment we give a particular narrative, and I normally give when a case where we all understand ABC, it's applicable in many situations. If C is far larger than A plus B, no, I give a narrative called long tail syndrome, right? Where did this long tail come? It is my own imagination, it's my own creation. And therefore, the moment it goes into the audience, into my client, it is picked up and it stays very firm, and they look for whether they have that syndrome or not every time. Now you can visualize it, and that's an area where many people have the wonderful capability on that. But looking for the connect, bringing the narrative, and delivering it in an appealing and engaging manner are the three key fundamentals of any data, any storytelling for that matter. But question I always get asked on this: do we follow any rules for this? The answer is there are no rules at all, because art is not a thing; it's a way. So you can have your own narrative. You can have your own narrative that is very specific to your culture, your location, your geography. At the end of the day, it's all about making human act. We saw that storytelling is making fact more human, right? And therefore, if we have to bring that human element into that, we need to get into what normal human beings are naturally understanding. We then come to what is data storytelling. But before data storytelling, I want to share about this whole concept of data information. We talked enough and more about data. We talked enough and more about information for the last 2 to 3 decades this time. So we even called the age as information age. Then we said moved to knowledge. And then we probably stopped at that point of time. And therefore, all of our activities, our development activities also still falls short. And that's why this whole emergence of data storytelling is probably coming up at this point of time. Having moved, probably it's an evolution, it's graduation from one level to another level. Let me visually explain what it is. So data, it's just data, right? Nobody consumes data, it's there, it's a base, right? But the moment we start putting some graphs and charts and all these things, it's looking like this as information. So we see some pattern in this. And then third is knowledge is only when you connect relevant pieces together, then it becomes knowledge. So it is much more easier and better to consume as compared to information. But we see when it is further evolving, if somebody is there, that's loads now. Again, we are over inundated with information, we are inundated with knowledge. What is it that is specifically useful for me? Can somebody give me an insight, right? And this is where, okay, that these are the 2-3 pieces of insight and so on. Is that enough? No. The next question is, how do I achieve that insight? How do I achieve that? So that gives you the wisdom. So if we need an impact in the overall, this summarizes that the story part of it. The story delivers the wisdom in the whole thing, right? So it has to move from data to information to knowledge to insight to wisdom. And that's essentially what data storytelling is, to give you a very visual appeal to that. We can go to the definition also. in a slide, and called Nussbaumer. She's one who's been advocating a lot about the data storytelling, and she also has published a book. And she said something very interesting, and I love quoting her on this particular quote of hers, which also pretty much applies to the DevOps community. If you simply present the data, like, you see, we develop a lot of dashboards in a mobile phone, if you take, and then you actually can scroll down 2-3 scrolls, and there is still data and information stored in the third scroll as well. But it's easy for your audience to say, oh, that's very interesting, it's fantastic, and we have all the things that is available and so on. But then they move on to the next thing, that's it. But if you are going to ask for an action, your audience has to make a decision whether to comply or not. That will elicit more productive response from them, and it will lead certainly to a conversation. And this is what lacks in our board meetings, if you see, right? They are the software, they are the fantastic, what do you call it, business intelligence. We call it power business intelligence, and with lots of visualization layers and all that. It's all there, but yet it falls short of something, right? So unless and otherwise, we evolved from delivering information to moving towards an insight and wisdom, and that is where will elicit human response, right? Because human beings fundamentally are not wired for data. That's very important for us to understand. We are wired for stories. We are not wired for data. We were forcefully consuming the data and consuming the information for just to pass through the evolution stages where we have now reached to storytelling applicable in a data environment. So definition is, or data storytelling is all about building a narrative by connected related data sets, setting appropriate context, and conveying the meaning of that data in a compelling visual fashion. Let's leave the definition here, and then it's always easy to, if we decode it and look at it. So it says it's all about building a narrative, right? Straight away. Narrative is the last mile to take the human towards action. Now, how do I build the narrative? For that, I need to connect the related data sets. This is precisely what we do in our various analysis and so on, right? So this is a data set, this is a data set. We try to connect them together for a particular purpose, all that stuff. So connecting the data sets, that's a lot of analysis is done there. Setting the appropriate context to that. But at the end of the day, we need to not deliver the information, but we need to deliver what it actually conveys in a compelling visual fashion. So this is a very nice comprehensive definition. Understanding becomes easier when we actually decode it into the components from the definition itself. How can data storytelling help in organizations? All our solutioning to all the corporate organizations are towards solving challenges and problems. So in a typical corporate environment, how data storytelling can help in organizations, we found 5 different ways where it can actually help them. One is in conveying, because we constantly convey certain things, certain findings, certain situations, and so on. So if you have to convey your thought in the form of information, it doesn't catch the attention. So again, storytelling becomes extremely important. And storytelling, you can just tell the story in 2 to 3 minutes time frame, and your audience will catch the point within that 2 to 3 minutes time frame. It is effortless for them, right? And your purpose of why did you the purpose and the intent for which you want to convey that information serves its purpose if we deliver it in the form of a story. Second thing is problem solving. Simulate solutions for the problems of varying complexities. Again, when you talk problem solving, it is already complex. That's why it's called problem solving. But then if we further complicate it in the communication process, it delays the overall thinking process and efficiency and so on. And that's where when we dissect the problem and then deliver a story, it drives clarity to the audience, to the team. And this is extremely important because as DevOps community, you carry the challenges and problems from the client side, and you have to deliver it to your development team. Again, there also you're actually not managing the team, you're managing a community of resources, right? storytelling becomes extremely effective if we are able to communicate it in a manner that is effortless for their understanding. Many a times decision making stalls and gets delayed because lack of understanding of the parties that are connected for that particular process. So again, here again, storytelling becomes extremely important because you can get the audience in flat few minutes time frame, and then the next rest of the discussions more focuses in terms of what is the solution, how can we solve it, how can we move forward, way forward, rather than defining the problem itself. So a story helps in defining the problem and takes you towards decision making. We have applied this into stages of strategy building in an organization, and over a period of time, it becomes a culture in an organization. Right? That people constantly identify and portray levers of changes in an organization where anything and everything is data oriented, data centric. This is a cry. This is a long drawn requirement, but it has not converted into a culture yet. So stories will actually speed up organizations in adopting data as a culture. Why data storytelling is from a context of tech community, we can see the tech community, there are two sides, especially the DevOps community. You have the two sides. You have the code side and you have the people side, right? And let's see what you do on the code side. Obviously, a developer should be comfortable in understanding and writing a code. And you as DevOps community, this is fantastically done already, right? Both sides understand what a code is, but that's only one side of the story, right? On the people side, you have a critical thing is your communication and empathy. Now, these two things, if we have to drive it and get it right, you know, there are two on one side and only one on the other side, but we are already good on the code side. Between the development community, people can communicate extremely well when it comes to technology. But when it comes to communication and when it comes to bringing that empathy into the communication, storytelling becomes extremely important for the DevOps community as well. So how I give you another tool for this. Now, whenever you are communicating to your community, essentially you are managing your community of developers. We found this particular tool to be extremely useful to be followed in the same sequence. So whenever we are communicating to your client as well as to your community, you need to first identify how can I seize the mind of my audience. All the more it becomes extremely important today because invariably almost all of us, the whole world works on work from home scenario. Now imagine if they're not even in front of you, they're not even in an office atmosphere, they're not even, the environment is more challenging while they are at home. Unless otherwise, before trying to tell the client side story and so on, if you do not put an effort to seize the mind of your audience, the whole thing will fail, right? And I'll tell you how and why it will fail. It will fail in the sense it will not achieve its the efficiency in the entire process. So seize the mind and then you articulate the idea. There's an effort in this. But if you have to spend additional 2 hours spent before, it will save several man hours as we go through the process. Like they say that, you know, if I have 1 hour, I will spend 55 minutes to cut the tree. I will spend 55 minutes only to sharpen the knife, right? The hacksaw blade. So that's precisely the objective here as well. So you need to seize the mind, then articulate the idea, which will further ignite the thinking in your audience. That will go and stimulate the action. Now, if I will reverse this, we are communicating in whatever manner today that we are trying to do, and we want the action, right? We are clear about that, right? We want the action, but the action doesn't come, right? How? Because in order to stimulate the action, we need to efficiently ignite the thinking in our audience. So that becomes, that is an important element. If we then need to, from our side, articulate the idea that we want to communicate, and then if we have to articulate the idea, the readiness of the audience has to be ensured. And how do you ensure the readiness of the audience? It's first of all sees the mind of your audience. So this, for a people side, it's an extremely important toolkit used by CEOs as well as anybody who communicates above or below. We use it whether it is a CEO communicating to the board. We use it for CEOs communicating down the line also. So it's applicable anywhere, and I use it on a very regular basis. So the real deal in data storytelling, I'm going to move on to some illustrative examples. And this is there's a video. I will share the link of that video, and people probably know the crow story. Crows are a very it's an intelligent and interesting bird, right? And generally, the video, if you'll have a look at it, the crows are fond of nuts, obviously. And what is this traffic light doing in between, right? So the challenge that the crows face in order to crack that walnut is going to be, it's a very huge task. And I'm giving you a narration of that particular video here. So what does the crows do? They call it crows in Japanese. So that's the how the YouTube video goes. So they go and then drop it from an altitude on a tarmac road, right? And then but problem that the crow faces is the nut gets run over by the automobiles, but it cannot go and then access the nut because of the traffic. So the crow then thinks an intelligent way, because now there is a client and there is a challenge. Now then crow connects with something called the traffic signal, and therefore we get a story. So what the crow does is it goes and then drops it right below the traffic signal. And then when the traffic signal becomes green, it crosses the road on the pedestrian crossing, picks up the nuts, then zooms it, and then comes out and so on. It's an interesting video to watch, but from there, the inspiration is when connected, it becomes a story. Otherwise, we are not there to solve the challenge. We are delivering information. Information never solves problems and challenges. That is why corporate world, there are still many unresolved problems and challenges, because it doesn't have a narrative, it doesn't have a story, it doesn't have a connect. Yet there is a lots of analysis, lots of reports, lots of visual deliverables that are seen in the corporate organization. But what was lacking is that storytelling. So I'm going to now come to the final stage of storytelling, where we applied, and I took an example which is pretty much a lowest denominator. There are several other complex cases where we have derived a story out of it, but most simple case is a receivable challenge that any and every organization would probably face. If you are giving credit, you will have receivable challenges and so on, right? And what did we deliver? The technology, right from the ERPs and so on. We have delivered a aging receivable report, and that's precisely all that. Now we have perhaps made it a little more better by giving some visual layering of this receivable report. Maybe then we say top 10. Our dashboard will immediately give a top 10 or the lowest 10 whatsoever and so on. And that's it. We still stand and stay at the information delivering stage, not moving and evolving to the next stages and so on. This is typically all of you can understand and then relate to what I'm saying, and that's why I took this example. The same thing, if it is receivable, you can also look at it from the inventory. That's also another aging story, right? Inventory aging, receivable aging, commonly present, right? What we did, and we went a little bit further, and we said, how do we understand the challenge, right? And if we go deeper and listen to the problem that the organization has, then we actually find that, oh, receivable means there are two dimensions to a receivable. One is the magnitude of the receivable. The other one is the severity of the receivable. These two are two different issues. They are not the same, but we generally don't look at it that way. Then second thing is to prioritize and segment them. Now these are all, I'm still staying at the analysis stage, right? So when we prioritize and segment, and in this particular case, I'm going to show you how I apply all the tools that I shared so far, right? I talked about AMP, audience, message, and purpose. We clearly understand audience and message and purpose. The purpose for this is I need the money back faster. right? It is the company, it's not an individual, it is not the accounting clerk, it is not the finance manager. The company needs to get back the money faster, right? And that's the whole objective, no matter what. Now, for that audience message and purpose, so I need to connect the data sets. I need to bring in the narrative and then set the visualization. So I'm not going to show the visualization part of it much thing, but I'm going to talk about how we achieved the first two elements. And I also will, so you can also see how I seize the mind, I articulate the idea, and I ignite the thinking and stimulate the action, how that also gets very well fitted into this particular example. So typically going back, all of us know that particular receivables challenges that organization faces, prioritize them and segment them based on how did I do that? So we said, let's put all the receivable cases, sort them on the magnitude and look at it from a percentage of outstanding to the total outstanding. You then apply certain business rule. Whosoever is 3% and above, or 1 to 3%, 0.5 to set up a business rule that is that varies from client to client or industry to industry and so on. So we then sort the magnitude of it. Magnitude is too much outstanding is a problem, but actually, if you look at it, it is really not the problem. If somebody has to pay $1 million, it need not be a problem, because 1 million may look high, but it is 1 million upon what? That's number one. And if it is 1 million, it also you need to look at it from, is it really severe? Is it really serious? Now, when you see the severity is defined by how old is the receivable challenge, right? If did he not pay, he or she did not pay over 90 days time frame, over 120 days, then it becomes a severity as an issue, right? So magnitude and severity, if I just combine them together, and then I set a priority based on a combination of magnitude and severity ranking, right? We all do this, right? We all do this in silo. We all do this individually, right? When I just combine them, and last thing is the magic that I do, which is not being done, which is this storytelling part. I segment them based on the application of this rules. I segment them into CCU, ICU, special ward, normal ward, OPD. This is the magic, and this is the story. So when I come back, when I go back to the client and I say that you have for 22% of your receivable issues are already in CCU. Now, imagine if it is in CCU, it is the job of the CEO or the CFO jointly to attend. So it is calling the attention of the right audience, right? That's number one. It is calling for the action just because it is termed as CCU cases and ICU cases. We can't expect an accounting clerk or a collection person to go and follow up on cases that are declared as CCU and ICU. So you see a point here, right? So now, once you get into that, I talked about the culture also, right? We call it the cultural pivot. See, the culture is, we will then slowly stop cases moving or graduating into CCU, ICU over a period of time, right? So therefore, because nobody wants, because automatically the top management, the senior leadership will be invariably, voluntarily stepping into the case because it is CCU. Like in the case of a medical, in a hospital, it is the job of the topmost administrator and the doctor to attend to CCU, ICU cases. Here, GP doesn't attend to CCU, ICU cases, right? So it is pretty similar to that. So the moment you coin it as CCU, ICU cases, then it automatically brings and calls the attention of then you can bucket them. I'm not showing it for want of time, but you can bucket them. These are all the set of clients who are in here, CCU, ICU. Then it brings a sense of a priority, and segments are handled by different competent people within the organization. Stories have forever been the cornerstones of shaping cultures, and it will continue to be. It's only something new to the data world, but that's the last bit. We have done enough in terms of technology, helping businesses and organizations. The last bit is your storytelling, which will redefine many things and drive the culture of data in organizations. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here.